The frost clung to the dry grass like regret, brittle and white, refusing to melt under a sun that had forgotten how to warm. An old man sat in a wooden rocking chair on the porch of a ranch house in Wyoming, his hands folded over a walking stick. He didn't really need but kept anyway. Samuel Cross was 95 years old, and his eyes held a particular clarity that comes only from having seen both the worst and best that life could offer. His grandson Michael sat on the porch steps, 18 years old, and restless the way young men are when the future feels both infinite and terrifying. The boy was leaving for the military in a week, shipping out to basic training before the world pulled him into another war. "You know why I built this house, Michael?" Sam's voice was still strong, roughened by decades of Wyoming wind, but steady as bedrock. Michael looked up surprised. His grandfather rarely talked about the past, kept his stories locked up tight like tools in a shed. "Not really, Grandpa. You always said it was a long story." "It is." Sam gazed out over the land, the autumn grass golden in the slanting light. "But now, before I go to live with your father in town, before you go off to serve your country, I reckon it's time you heard it." The boy shifted, settling in. He'd learned to listen when the old man decided to speak. Sam pointed with his walking stick toward the foundation stones visible at the corner of the house. "See those? I learned to lay foundation like that from the first house I built. Back in 1885, I was 30 years old then, already a widower, had my boy Jake, who was 5, and I thought I understood what loss meant." He paused, and something moved behind his eyes, some memory rising like water. "I didn't. Not yet. Not until I met her." The old man's gaze went distant, seeing not the Wyoming ranch around them, but somewhere else, somewhere colder and harder and more unforgiving. It started on an October morning in Wyoming territory, the kind of morning when your breath freezes before it leaves your lips. The cabin was small, just one room with a sleeping loft Sam had built himself. He woke before dawn, as he always did, to the sound of silence, so complete it felt like pressure against his ears. Jake was still asleep in the wooden crib Sam had made too big for it, really, but Sam kept putting off building a proper bed. Building a bed meant accepting that his son was growing up without a mother, and that was a truth that sat heavy some mornings. Sam dressed in the dark, not wanting to wake the boy. His hands moved with the efficiency of long practice pants, shirt suspenders, boots. He built a fire in the small stove, set water to boil for coffee. While it heated, he checked his rifle, a habit so ingrained he barely noticed doing it anymore. The Winchester hung by the door, always loaded, always ready. This was hard country, and carelessness killed. The coffee was strong and bitter, the way he liked it. Sam drank it, standing at the window watching the sun try to break through the morning fog. In 3 years, he'd gotten good at mornings. The nights were harder when the cabin felt too quiet and too empty, but mornings he could manage. Mornings had tasks, and tasks kept a man's mind from wandering into places it shouldn't go. Jake stirred, made a small sound. Sam set down his cup and went to the crib. "Morning, son." The boy's eyes opened, still heavy with sleep. "Pa, hungry." "I know, let's get you dressed first." Sam helped Jake into his clothes, teaching as he went. "Buttons from the bottom up. So that way they stay straight." The boy's fingers fumbled, but he was learning. Sam felt a fierce pride watching those small hands work. Jake was going to be capable. Sam would make sure of that. Breakfast was bacon and bread, simple and quick. Jake ate with the focused intensity of a child who'd learned not to waste food. Sam watched him, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. The boy looked like Rebecca, had her dark eyes and quick smile. Some mornings that was a comfort. Other mornings it was a knife, a knock at the door. Sam opened it to find Tom Fletcher, the ranch foreman, already bundled against the cold. "Morning, Sam. Need you to check the south fence line today. Some sections looked weak last time I rode past." "Can do. Martha available to watch Jake?" "She is. Boy can help her with the chickens if he wants." Sam looked back at his son. "You hear that? You get to help Miss Martha today." Jake nodded, solemn. "Yes, sir." After Tom left, Sam finished his coffee and gathered his tools. Fence mending was straightforward work, the kind he preferred. You could see what was broken, fix it, and know it would hold. Life should be that simple. Usually it wasn't. He rode out on his bay gelding, a steady horse with no flash but plenty of sense. The kind of horse that wouldn't spook when you needed it calm. Sam had learned to value reliability over excitement. Excitement got people killed. The south fence line ran along the edge of Price Ranch property, separating good grazing land from open prairie. Sam rode it slowly, checking each post, each wire. The work was methodical, almost meditative. His hands knew what to do, leaving his mind free to wander. 3 years since Rebecca died. 3 years of raising Jake alone, working the ranch, keeping his head down, and his grief private. People had been kind at first, brought food, and offered help, but kindness faded when you didn't give people what they wanted. They wanted to see him heal, move on, maybe court one of the available women in town. Sam wasn't interested. He had Jake. He had work. That was enough. He was tightening a loose wire when he heard it. A sound so faint, he almost missed it. The cry of a child, weak and exhausted, the kind of cry that came after all the strength had been used up. Sam's head came up sharp, listening. There, Pin. Again, coming from beyond a collapsed section of fence about 50 yards ahead. He urged the bay forward, coming around a stand of scraggly cottonwoods, and stopped. A woman stood at the fence line, one hand gripping a post for support. She held an infant against her hip, the baby wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Two other children huddled nearby under a tattered blanket, their breath rising in thin clouds in the cold air. They were too quiet. Children should make noise, should fidget and play. These children just stared at the ground with the empty eyes of people who'd stopped hoping. The woman didn't look up when Sam approached, didn't acknowledge his presence at all. Her hands were cracked and filthy, her dress torn at the hem, her face gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. But her back was straight. Even now, broken and desperate, she held herself with a kind of fierce pride that Sam recognized because he'd seen it in his own mirror. He knew this look, knew it in his bones. This was someone at the edge, standing on that final line between keeping going and giving up. He'd stood on that line himself after Rebecca died. Had teetered there for weeks, Jake's crying the only thing that pulled him back each time. Sam dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm and unthreatening. You're standing on Price Ranch land. The woman's jaw tightened, but she didn't look at him. Her voice when she spoke was hoarse, like she'd screamed herself raw and was down to her last words. Then that's one more truth. I got no place else to stand. Not defensive, not apologetic, just factual. Sam respected that. That's not a threat, he said, gentling his tone. Just telling you where you are. She shifted the baby higher on her hip. The infant whimpered a sound that went straight through Sam's chest. He'd heard Jake make that sound back when he was small and hungry, and Sam didn't know yet how to warm a bottle right. How long you been here? Since last night. Sam looked past her, scanning the horizon. Where's your wagon? Broke. Mile back. We walked. You walked. It wasn't a question. He could see it in her torn skirt, the children's muddy shoes, the way they all swayed slightly with exhaustion. The woman finally looked at him, then really looked, and Sam saw eyes that held the kind of emptiness he'd only seen once before. In his own face 3 years ago, when the preacher had finished saying words over Rebecca's grave and Sam had gone home to a cabin that would never feel full again. You got food? He asked. No. Sam pulled a bundle of cornbread from his saddlebag wrapped in cloth. He walked past the woman to the older boy, maybe 6 years old, and held it out. The boy looked at his mother. She gave the smallest nod. The child took the food with shaking hands. For your sisters, Sam said. Then yourself. He turned back to the woman. She was watching him now with something like suspicion, like kindness was a trap she'd learned to avoid. Name's Sam, Sam Cross. I work for Price Ranch. Silence. Then after a long moment, Grace Bennett from Kerrville. Your husband. Dead. Lightning strike. April. The words were flat, drained of emotion. Sam understood that too. When grief was too big, you had to make it small, had to pack it down tight just to function. Feeling it all at once would destroy you. I'm sorry. People keep saying that. I know. He did know. Sorry was what people said when they didn't know what else to offer. Sorry didn't fill an empty bed or teach a boy to be a man or pay for food. Sorry was just noise. Sam looked at the children again. The girl, maybe 4, had her thumb in her mouth. The baby's eyes were too bright, fever bright. They wouldn't last long out here. A week, maybe less. The cold alone would take them. He could ride away. Should ride away. He had Jake to think about, had his own burdens to carry. Getting involved with strangers' troubles was how men ended up drowning in problems that weren't theirs to solve. But he kept seeing that fence line from 15 years ago, the one where he'd found his brother Nathan frozen in the snow. Kept seeing Rebecca's face going pale as the blood soaked through the sheets and there was nothing he could do. Nothing anyone could do. Kept remembering all the moments when he couldn't help, couldn't save, couldn't do a damn thing, but watch people die. Maybe this once he could do something different. You got a fire somewhere. Grace shook her head. Sam looked around, spotted the collapsed barn about 100 yards off. Come on, let's get out of this cold. He started walking toward the barn, not looking back to see if she followed. After a moment, he heard footsteps, the slow shuffle of exhausted people who'd been walking too long. The barn was more ruined than structure, roof half caved in and walls leaning at dangerous angles. But there was a section in the corner that still had some shelter, and Sam found an old cast iron sheet that would do for a fire base. He swept out a space with his hat, cleared away the worst of the debris, and started gathering dry grass and small sticks. Grace stood in the doorway holding the baby, watching him work. The children clustered against her legs. Sam built the fire with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. 3 strikes of the flint and the tinder caught. He fed it carefully, adding larger pieces until it burned steady and warm. The children crept closer, drawn to the heat like moths. Sit, Sam told them. Warm up. He pulled the tin of beans from his saddlebag, the one he'd packed for his own lunch, and set it near the fire to heat. Grace lowered herself to the ground with the careful movements of someone whose body had been pushed past its limits. The baby fussed, and Grace rocked her automatically, the motion so ingrained it required no thought. I'm not asking for charity, Grace said, her voice sharp despite its roughness. Sam kept his eyes on the fire. Not offering any, just lunch. Why are you doing this? He considered the question, poking at the fire with a stick. Why was he doing this? The easy answer was that he was a decent man and these were people in need. The true answer was more complicated. Because once, he said slowly, someone did it for me. Grace studied him, and Sam felt the weight of her gaze. She was trying to figure him out, trying to determine if he was safe or dangerous help or harm. He didn't blame her. A woman alone with children had to be cautious. Where are you headed? He asked. Nowhere now. The admission seemed to cost her. I was trying to reach my sister in Springfield. Letter came back. She's gone. How long you been on the road? Since early October. 6 weeks. Sam did the math without meaning to. 6 weeks of walking, scrounging, surviving. 6 weeks of watching your children get hungrier and weaker and colder. That kind of endurance spoke to a will like iron. The beans were hot enough. Sam wrapped his bandana around the tin and handed it to Grace. She stared at it. Your children first, he said, then you. She took the tin and Sam saw her hands shake, saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. She fed the children with a spoon Sam provided, making sure each got a fair share before she took a bite herself. She chewed slowly like she'd forgotten what food tasted like. Sam leaned back against the support beam and watched the fire. Gave her space, gave her time. He knew what it was like to be so broken you didn't trust anything good. Knew how kindness could feel like a cruelty when you were too far gone to believe in it. After a while, Grace spoke. I was ready to quit. Thought if I could just lie down and be still, maybe the wind would take me. Sam said nothing, just let her words sit in the air between them. But then she cried. Grace looked down at the baby, and I didn't. The fire popped, sending sparks up toward the broken rafters. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose boards. You got nowhere to go, Sam said. Not a question. No. There's work if you want it. Bunkhouse up on the ridge. They need help with cooking, cleaning. You'd earn your keep, room and board for you and the children. Grace's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? Because you're standing where I stood 3 years ago. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Sam met her gaze straight on. My wife died giving birth to our son. I had a 5-month-old baby and no idea how to keep him alive. The owner of this ranch gave me a cabin, gave me work, and a woman named Martha taught me how to care for Jake. They didn't save me. They gave me a chance to save myself. Understanding flickered in Grace's eyes. You lost your wife. 3 years back, Rebecca was her name. Good woman. Too good for this hard country. Sam's throat tightened, and he cleared it roughly. Point is, I know what it's like to be alone with a child who needs you. And I know what it means when someone helps without making you feel small for needing it. And you think I should trust you? No, you shouldn't trust anyone. But you should consider the offer. Grace looked at her children. The boy, the one who'd taken the cornbread, had fallen asleep against his sister's shoulder. The little girl's eyes were closing. The baby breathed soft and steady against Grace's chest, finally warm enough to rest. What's the catch? Grace asked. No catch. You work, you earn. You don't work out, you leave. Simple as that? Nothing's ever that simple. No, Sam agreed, but sometimes it's close enough. The fire burned down to coals while Grace thought. Sam didn't rush her, didn't push. A person had to make their own choice about this kind of thing. Anything forced wouldn't hold. Finally, Grace nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. All right, but I work for every bite. I won't take handouts. Understood. Sam stood, brushed the dust from his pants. I'll come back tomorrow morning. If you're still here, I'll take it as yes. He walked to his horse, mounted up, and rode away without looking back. He'd learned that sometimes people needed space to make up their minds without an audience. Tomorrow would tell him what Grace had decided. That night, Sam lay in bed listening to Jake's soft breathing from the crib. He thought about Grace and her children in that coal barn, thought about the look in her eyes, that mix of desperation and determination. He'd seen that look in his own mirror often enough to recognize it. Maybe he was a fool for getting involved. Probably was. But he kept thinking about Nathan frozen in the snow because Sam had given up searching too soon. Kept thinking about all the times he'd failed to help, failed to save, failed to be enough. This time he could do better. When morning came, Sam woke before dawn and went through his usual routine. But this time he packed extra food in his saddlebag. Flour, salt beans, and a blanket that had been Rebecca's one he couldn't bear to use but couldn't bring himself to throw away. If Grace was still there, she'd need supplies. Jake ate his breakfast and chattered about the chickens he'd helped Martha feed yesterday. Sam listened with half his attention, the other half already riding south to that broken fence line. Pa, you listening? I am, son. You did good helping Miss Martha. Can I go again today? Probably. After dropping Jake with Martha, Sam rode out. The morning was cold frost thick on the grass. His breath steamed. The bay picked its way carefully over the frozen ground. When he came around the cottonwoods, he saw Grace standing outside the barn, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. She'd been watching for him. The children were behind her, cleaner than yesterday, their faces washed. Sam dismounted, pulling the supply sack from his saddle. Morning. You came back, Grace said like she hadn't quite believed he would. Said I would. I'm still here. I see that. Sam held out the sack, brought some supplies, flour, salt, other things, for the journey up to the bunkhouse. Grace took the sack, her movements stiff, pride warring with need. Need won as it had to. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Works hard up there. Martha Whitmore runs the place and she doesn't tolerate laziness. I'm not lazy. Didn't say you were. Sam tied a supply bundle to the horse's pack. You ready to go now or you need time? We're ready. The journey to the bunkhouse took an hour on horseback. Sam walked his bay slow, letting Grace and the children set the pace. The older boy, Ben, helped his sister Lucy over the rough patches. Grace carried the baby and didn't complain once, though Sam saw the strain in her face, the way she gritted her teeth against exhaustion. The land changed as they climbed the open prairie, giving way to rolling hills cut through with dry creek beds. Sam pointed out landmarks as they went teaching, without making a lesson of it. Creek there runs year-round, good water. That stand of cottonwoods, that's where the cattle shelter, when the wind comes hard from the north. You learn the land, it'll take care of you. Grace listened but didn't respond. She was saving her strength, every bit of it, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. When they crested this final rise, the bunkhouse came into view. It wasn't much to look at, just a long, low building with a patched tin roof and a curl of smoke rising from the chimney. But it was solid, well-maintained, and most importantly, warm. A windmill creaked nearby, pumping water with patient persistence. Chickens scratched in a yard protected by wire fencing. That's home, Sam said. For now, anyway. Grace stopped staring at the building like it might disappear if she looked away. It's real. It's real. They approached the bunkhouse, and before they reached the door, it opened. Martha Whitmore stood there, a sharp-boned woman with iron gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Grace up and down, then the children, then settled her gaze back on Grace. "You've got your hands full," Martha said, her voice like gravel. "I manage." "We'll see." Martha stepped aside. "Come in then. No sense freezing while we talk." Inside the bunkhouse was simple but clean. Long wooden tables for eating, a cooking area with a massive iron stove, and bunks lining the walls. It smelled of bread and coffee and wood smoke. Grace's children pressed close to her, overwhelmed by the sudden warmth and strangeness. Martha walked to the stove and ladled out bowls of oatmeal without being asked. She set them on the table with spoons. "Eat. We'll talk after." The children fell on the food like wolves. Grace ate more slowly, but Sam saw her hands shake as she lifted the spoon. How long since she'd had a real meal, since any of them had? Martha watched them eat, her expression unreadable. When they'd finished, she collected the bowls and set them in a washing basin. "I need help with cooking and cleaning," Martha said, getting straight to business. "Breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper after dark. I feed about 12 men regular or during branding or roundup. I keep a clean house, and I expect the same from anyone working with me." "You have a problem with hard work." "No, ma'am," Grace said. "Good. Your children can stay in the corner there." Martha pointed to a sectioned-off area near the back. "There's a cot and some blankets. I watch the ranch hands' young ones during the day when needed. Yours will be safe." Grace's throat worked. "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask you to. You work, you earn your keep. That's the arrangement. Fair trade for fair work." Sam watched the exchange, impressed despite himself. Martha had a way of cutting through nonsense and getting to the heart of things. No pity, no charity, just straightforward transaction. Grace needed that, needed to feel like she was earning her way instead of being handed anything. "I'll work," Grace said. "I'll work hard." "See that you do." Martha showed Grace to the corner area, helped her settle the children on the cot. The baby Sarah was already half asleep, lulled by the warmth and full belly. Ben and Lucy curled up on either side, their eyes heavy. Sam stood by the door, hat in hand, watching Grace tuck a blanket around her children. Her face was still lined with exhaustion, but some of the desperate edge had softened. She had shelter now. Food. Safety. That was a start. Martha came back to where Sam waited. "She'll do," Martha said quietly. "Got spine, that one. Just needs time to remember it." "I thought so too." "You planning to check on her regular?" Sam shrugged. "I'm out this way often enough. Fence line runs close." Martha's eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement. "I'm sure it does." Over the next week, a routine developed. Sam came by every 2 or 3 days, always with a reason. He needed to check the windmill. Had extra firewood from clearing trees. Wanted to make sure the chicken coop fence was holding. Reasonable excuses, all of them, and nobody questioned him too hard. The truth was, he wanted to see how Grace was managing. Wanted to make sure she wasn't being treated poorly, that the work wasn't too much, that her children were settling in. He told himself it was just basic decency, looking after someone he'd helped. But there was more to it than that, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Grace worked like someone possessed. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed, cooked meals that had the ranch hands asking for seconds, mended clothes with stitches so small they barely showed. Martha watched her with approval that she didn't bother hiding. "Woman knows what she's about," Martha told Sam one evening. "Hasn't complained once, not even when her hands cracked from the lye soap." The children were thriving too. Ben had found a friend in Jake, the two boys becoming inseparable when they weren't working. They built forts from hay bales and played at being cowboys and ranchers. Lucy followed Martha around like a devoted shadow, absorbing lessons in cooking and sewing with surprising focus. Even baby Sarah seemed happier, her cheeks filling out, her cries less frequent. But Grace herself remained distant, polite, but never warm. She thanked Sam when he brought supplies, but didn't encourage conversation. Worked when he was there, but didn't seek him out when he wasn't. It was like she'd built a wall around herself, and Sam understood that too. Walls kept you safe when the world had proven itself dangerous. He didn't push, just kept showing up, kept being useful, kept proving through actions that he wasn't a threat. Then came the boots. Sam had been going through Rebecca's things, something he did once or twice a year when he felt strong enough. Most of her clothes he'd given away long ago, but there were a few items he'd kept. Her wedding ring, which Jake would have someday. A locket with a curl of her hair. And her boots, good sturdy leather boots she'd worn for riding and ranch work. He'd kept them out of sentiment, but sentiment didn't warm feet or keep them dry. And he'd noticed Grace limping, lately noticed the sole of her left boot was worn clean through. He brought the boots to the bunkhouse on a cold afternoon in late November, found Grace in the kitchen kneading bread dough. Her hands were red and chapped, the knuckles cracked and bleeding in places. She worked steadily, didn't look up when he entered. "Brought something for you," Sam said. Now she looked up, wariness immediate in her eyes. Sam set the boots on the table. "Your sole's worn through. These should fit." Grace stared at the boots like they might bite her. "I can't take those." "Why not? They're too fine." And they were someone's. "They were my wife's." Sam kept his voice level, matter of fact. "She's gone 3 years. Boots don't do any good sitting on a shelf. Better they get used." "Sam, I can't." "Can't or won't." Grace's jaw set that stubborn line Sam was coming to recognize. "Both. You're limping. Noticed it yesterday. Left foot. Your boot's got a hole in it, and winter's coming on hard. You get frostbite, you can't work. Can't work, you can't take care of your children." He pushed the boot slightly toward her. "Pride's all well and good, but it doesn't keep your feet warm." "It's not about pride." "What's it about then?" Grace looked at him, really looked, and Sam saw something raw flash across her face. "I keep taking things from you. Keep being in your debt. How do I ever repay that?" "You don't." Sam leaned against the table. "That's not how this works. Someone helped me when I needed it. Now I help you. Someday maybe you help someone else. That's the repayment. Not to me, to whoever comes next." Silence. Grace's hands stilled in the dough. "My brother died in a snowstorm," Sam said quietly. 15 years ago. I was 15, he was 13. We got separated in a blizzard. I searched for 2 hours and gave up. Went home, found him the next morning, frozen." He paused, old grief rising like bile. "I've lived with that for 15 years. The knowing that I gave up too soon, that if I just kept looking, maybe I would have found him in time." Grace's expression softened just a fraction. "So when I saw you at that fence line, I saw a chance to not give up, to keep looking until I found something I could actually help." Sam straightened. "Take the boots, Grace. Let me do this one thing right." She studied him for a long moment, then slowly reached for the boots. Her fingers traced the stitching, well made and carefully maintained. "They're beautiful. They're practical. Try them on." Grace sat down and unlaced her own worn boots, revealing feet wrapped in strips of cloth where the holes had been. Sam's chest tightened seeing it, but he said nothing. She pulled on Rebecca's boots, took a few steps. They fit. "They're perfect," she whispered. "Good." Sam headed for the door, not wanting to see the tears that were gathering in her eyes. "See you in a few days. Need to check the south fence again." "Sam." He stopped, hand on the doorframe. "Thank you." He nodded once and left before the ache in his own chest could become something more. The next day, Grace wore the boots to work. Sam saw her in them when he dropped Jake off, saw the way she stood a little straighter, walked without limping. Martha noticed too, caught his eye, and gave him the smallest nod of approval. December came in hard, bringing snow that fell thick and fast. The temperature dropped until breathing hurt, until water froze in its bucket overnight. Sam worked longer hours, making sure the livestock had access to shelter, that the feed was distributed, that nothing was left undone that could cost lives in the cold. The bunkhouse stayed warm, the big stove burning day and night. Grace and Martha kept it fed, kept the coffee hot, kept the men working outside from freezing when they came in. It was good work, hard work, and Sam could see Grace finding her strength in it. One evening, he stayed later than usual, helping Tom Fletcher repair a section of roof that had started leaking. When they finished, dark had fallen and snow was coming down steady. Sam headed inside to warm up before the ride home. Grace was alone in the kitchen, the children already asleep in their corner. She was making coffee, moving through the familiar motions with easy competence. When she saw Sam, she poured a second cup without asking and set it on the table. "Thought you might need this." Sam wrapped his cold hands around the cup, grateful. "Appreciate it." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while the wind howled outside. After a while, Grace spoke. "You're different than when I first met you." "How so?" "Less careful, like you're not watching every word before you say it." Sam considered that. Maybe I'm more comfortable. Around me, around this. He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the bunkhouse, the whole situation. Helping. I forgot what it felt like. Grace leaned against the counter. Martha told me about your wife. How she died. Did she? Said you were a mess after. Barely functioned for months. That Jake was the only thing that kept you going. Sam didn't confirm or deny it, just sipped his coffee. I understand that, Grace said softly. The barely functioning part. The only keeping going because someone needs you. I figured you might. You ever stop feeling guilty for being alive when they're not? The question hit deeper than Grace probably knew. Sam set down his cup, chose his words carefully. No, but you learn to carry it different, like rocks in your pocket. Still, they're still heavy, but you get used to the weight. I don't want to get used to it. I know, but you will because you have to. Because those children need a mother who can function, not one who's drowning in what was. Grace's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back hard. Is that what you tell yourself about Jake? Every day. She nodded in understanding, passing between them, without need for more words. They'd both stood at the edge. Both looked into the darkness and decided to step back, not for themselves, but for the small lives depending on them. That kind of choice left marks bound you to anyone else who'd made the same decision. The wind rattled the windows. Snow hissed against the glass. Storm's getting worse, Grace said. I should head back. You could stay. There's bunks, safer than riding in this. Sam hesitated. It would be smarter to stay. The storm was only going to get worse. But staying meant something created a familiarity he wasn't sure either of them was ready for. Jake's with Martha tonight, Sam said. She knows not to expect me until morning if the weather turns. I'll stay. Grace nodded, didn't make it into more than it was. Sam bedded down in one of the empty bunks fully clothed, listening to the storm rage outside. He thought about Rebecca, about Nathan, about all the ghosts that followed a man through his life. But he also thought about Grace and her children, about Jake laughing with Ben, about this strange new thing he was building without quite meaning to. He fell asleep to the sound of wind and woke to sunlight streaming through frosted windows. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried under fresh snow. Grace was already up making breakfast. She moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, and when she saw Sam awake, she poured him coffee without speaking. The silence was comfortable, companionable. Over the next weeks, Sam found himself at the bunkhouse more often. Not every day, but often enough that his presence became expected. He and Grace fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side when there were tasks that needed two sets of hands. They talked sometimes small conversations about weather or work or children. Other times they worked in silence, and that was fine too. The children bonded, all four of them becoming a unit. Jake and Ben were inseparable. Lucy adored them both, and even baby Sarah brightened when Jake walked in. Sam watched his son bloom, with the companionship become more confident, more open. It did something to his heart seeing Jake happy, and Grace was changing too. The desperate edge had softened, replaced by something steadier. She smiled occasionally, small, careful smiles, but real. She still worked harder than anyone, but now it seemed less like penance and more like pride. Sam realized one day that he looked forward to seeing her. Looked forward to the way she'd nod when he came in, the way she'd have coffee ready without asking, the way she'd sometimes ask his opinion on something and actually listen to his answer. It wasn't romance, wasn't anything so dramatic. But it was connection, and he'd been without that for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like. Then came the day that changed everything. Sam arrived at the bunkhouse just as the afternoon light was fading, bringing firewood he had split that morning. Grace met him at the door, took one look at his face and frowned. What's wrong? Nothing, just tired. You're a terrible liar. Sam set down the wood-brushed snow from his coat. Had to put down one of the horses today. Old mare been with the ranch for years. She broke her leg in a gopher hole. Nothing to be done. Understanding softened Grace's expression. I'm sorry. It's ranch life. Happens. Doesn't make it easier. No. Sam looked at her, at this woman who understood loss in a way most people didn't. No, it doesn't. Grace touched his arm just briefly, just a moment of connection. Come have coffee. You look frozen. They sat at the kitchen table and Grace poured coffee that was still hot from the pot. Sam wrapped his hands around the cup and felt some of the day's hardness start to ease. You ever think about leaving, Grace asked suddenly. Starting over somewhere new, somewhere without all the memories. Every day for the first year? What stopped you? Jake needed stability, and running doesn't actually leave anything behind. You just carry it with you to a new place. Grace nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that, about what comes next. I can't stay in the bunkhouse forever. Eventually, I'll need something more permanent. Sam's heart did something complicated in his chest, some mix of hope and fear he didn't want to examine. You thinking of leaving? I don't know, maybe. Maybe not. She looked at him directly. Would it matter to you if I did? And there it was, the question that made everything real that required an answer Sam wasn't sure he had. Yes, he said finally, it would matter. Why, P.O.? Because you matter. The words came out rough, unpracticed. You and your children. You've become important, to me and Jake both. Grace's breath caught. Sam, I'm not saying I have answers. I'm not saying I know what any of this means, but I know I don't want you to leave. Before Grace could respond, the door burst open. Tom Fletcher stood there, snow-covered and breathing hard. Sam, it's Jake. He and Ben went to the stable after lunch. Haven't come back. We've been searching but can't find them. Storm's coming in fast. Sam was on his feet instantly, fear slamming through him like a fist. How long? 2 hours, maybe 3. Too long, much too long in this cold. Sam was already moving, grabbing his coat, checking his rifle by pure instinct. Grace stood. I'm coming with you. No, too dangerous. Ben's my son. I'm coming. Sam looked at her face, saw the same terror he felt reflected there. She wouldn't be stopped, and he understood that. Fine, but we rope together. We don't get separated. They went out into the dying light. The temperature had dropped even further, and snow was starting to fall. Other men were already searching, spreading out across the ranch property. Tom gave them the south section, toward the creek. Sam and Grace moved quickly, calling the boys' names. Sam's mind kept showing him Nathan's frozen face, kept replaying that morning 15 years ago when he'd found his brother too late. Not this time. Please God, not this time. Jake, he called. Ben. Nothing but wind. They searched for an hour, the storm growing worse. Snow fell thick now, cutting visibility to a few feet. Sam's fear turned to something darker. Something that tasted like despair. They were running out of time. Then Grace grabbed his arm. There, the old shed by the creek. They ran stumbling through snowdrifts. The shed was barely visible, half collapsed and leaning dangerously. Sam yanked open the door. Both boys were huddled in the corner, wrapped in an old tarp they'd found. They were conscious, but barely, their lips blue, their skin frighteningly pale. Sam grabbed Jake, pulled him close. Son, look at me. Jake's eyes opened, unfocused. Pa, cold. I know, I've got you now. Grace had Ben was checking him over with shaking hands. He's breathing, but barely. We need to get them back, now. Sam wrapped his coat around Jake, lifted his son, and held him close to share warmth. Grace did the same with Ben. They made their way back through the storm, fighting wind and snow and creeping cold. The bunkhouse appeared like a miracle, lights burning in the windows. Martha met them at the door, took one look at the children, and moved into action. Get them by the stove. Not too close, don't want to shock them. Grace, get blankets. Sam, start water for warm baths, not hot. And someone get Doc Harrison. They worked together, following Martha's orders. The children were stripped of wet clothes, wrapped in blankets, given warm broth to sip. Slowly, painfully, slowly color started returning to their faces. Their breathing deepened. They stopped shivering, quite so violently. Doc Harrison arrived and examined both boys. They'll be fine. Got them in time. Another hour and we'd be telling a different story. Sam sat beside Jake's cot, holding his son's hand. Grace sat by Ben, doing the same. They didn't speak. There were no words for this kind of fear, this kind of relief. Later, after the boys had fallen into exhausted sleep after the other men had gone back to their bunks, Sam found Grace standing outside. She was staring up at the stars, her arms wrapped around herself. He stood beside her, and they shared silence for a long moment. I thought we'd lost them, Grace whispered. I know. Me too. When I was running through that storm, all I could think was that I'd survived everything else just to lose him now, to fail when it mattered most. Sam understood that fear bone deep. But we didn't fail. We found them. You found them. If you hadn't thought of the shed, you spotted it. We did this together. Grace turned to look at him, and in the moonlight reflecting off snow, Sam saw tears on her cheeks. What you said before about us mattering, about not wanting us to leave. I meant it. I don't want to leave either. Her voice broke slightly. I'm terrified of what that means of caring about someone again, of risking this kind of pain. But I don't want to leave. Sam reached for her hand and Grace let him take it. Her fingers were cold, and he wrapped both his hands around hers to warm them. I'm scared too, he admitted. I lost my wife, lost my brother. I know what it's like to love someone and lose them, but I also know what it's like to be alone, and I don't want to be alone anymore. Neither do I. They stood like that, hands clasped, breathing in the cold night air. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Around them, the ranch slept. And something new, something fragile but real began to take shape between them. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was something quieter, something built on understanding and shared fear, and the knowledge that both of them had stood at the edge and chosen to step back. It was the beginning of trust, the first foundation stone of something that might, with time and care, become a home. Sam squeezed Grace's hand gently. We should get inside, cold out here. In a minute, Grace looked up at the stars again. I just want to stand here and feel grateful. So they did. They stood together under the winter stars, two broken people who'd found each other at the edge of giving up, and they felt the fierce gratitude of parents whose children still breathed, still lived, still had a chance at tomorrow. When they finally went inside, Sam didn't let go of her hand until they had to separate Grace to check on her children and Sam to check on his. And even then, even across the room, they kept finding each other's eyes, kept sharing that understanding that needed no words. The frost that had clung so stubbornly was finally beginning to lift. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, like ice melting in spring sun. And for the first time in 3 years, Sam Cross allowed himself to hope that warmth might be possible again. December came to Wyoming territory like a fist closing around the land. The temperature dropped so low that spit froze before it hit the ground, and the wind cut through wool and leather like they were paper. But inside the bunkhouse, the stove burned hot, and the work continued, and Sam Cross found himself spending more time there than he strictly needed to. He told himself it was practical. The fence line near the bunkhouse needed constant checking. The windmill required regular maintenance. The henhouse roof had developed a leak that needed monitoring. All legitimate reasons for a ranch hand to be in the area 4 or 5 times a week. The truth which Sam was only beginning to admit to himself was that he wanted to be there. Wanted to see Grace move through her day with that quiet competence she developed, wanted to watch Jake and Ben build their friendship. Wanted to feel like part of something larger than just him and his grief. On a cold afternoon in mid-December, Sam arrived with tools to repair the henhouse roof that had been leaking since the last storm. Grace was in the garden plot, covered now with burlap for winter, checking the protective covering. Need a hand, Sam called. Grace looked up, and something that might have been pleasure crossed her face before she schooled it back to neutrality. If you're offering. They worked together in the kind of comfortable silence that only comes after people have spent enough time together to stop performing. Sam climbed the ladder to examine the roof, while Grace held it steady, her hands firm on the rails. How's it look? She asked. Not bad. Just need some new tar paper over this section. Should hold till spring. You know how to do everything, don't you? There was no mockery in her voice, just honest observation. Sam climbed down, wiping his hands on his pants. Not everything, just ranch work. You learn or you don't survive out here. Can you teach me? The question surprised him. And teach you what? This, all of it. How to fix things, how to read weather, how to survive without depending on someone else. Grace met his eyes directly. I don't want to be helpless again. Don't want to stand at another fence line not knowing what to do. Sam understood that need bone deep. After Rebecca died, he'd thrown himself into learning everything he could, driven by the terror of being incompetent when Jake needed him. I can teach you, won't be easy. I'm not looking for easy. So they began. Over the following weeks, Sam showed Grace how to check fence tension, how to read the sky for coming weather, how to calculate feed ratios for livestock. She absorbed it all with fierce concentration, asked smart questions, remembered everything. Watching her learn filled Sam with a satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, they were working on the fence line together, Grace holding the wire taut while Sam hammered staples. The rhythm of it was almost meditative, the physical work leaving their minds free to wander. "Martha told me more about your wife," Grace said suddenly. Sam's hammer paused mid-swing. "That's so. Said she was small, liked to laugh, that she was too gentle for this country." Sam drove the staple home before answering. Rebecca was born back east, Philadelphia. Her father was a banker. She came west because she thought it would be an adventure. He pulled another staple from his pocket. Turned out to be more adventure than she bargained for. "You loved her." "I did." Sam moved to the next post. "Still do in a way. You don't stop loving someone just because they're gone." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Thomas, my husband, he died so fast. Lightning strike while he was fixing the barn roof. One second he was there, next he was on the ground, and I knew. I knew before I even got to him." Her voice was steady, but Sam heard the old pain underneath. "Sometimes I wonder which is worse, losing someone in an instant or watching them slip away slow." "Both are terrible," Sam said, "just in different ways." "Did you watch Rebecca die, E?" The question was direct, but Sam didn't mind it. Grace had earned the right to ask hard questions. "Yes, the midwife and Doc Harrison did everything they could, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. She knew it too. Toward the end, she made me promise to take care of Jake, to not let grief make me stupid." He swallowed hard. "Took me a while to keep that promise." "How long?" "Longer than I like to admit. First few months, I was barely functional. Jake would cry, and I'd stare at him like I didn't know what to do. Martha basically moved in, taught me how to care for a baby because I was too much of a mess to figure it out myself." Grace looked at him with something like wonder. "And now look at you. You saved me and my children. You're teaching me to be strong. You've got Jake thriving. Took 3 years to get here, 3 years of putting one foot in front of the other even when I wanted to lie down and quit." Sam met her eyes. "Same thing you're doing now." They went back to work, the understanding between them deepening, with each shared story, each moment of honesty. As they walked back to the bunkhouse later, the sun setting behind winter clouds, Grace spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Always. That scar on your hand, the one across your palm, where'd that come from?" Sam looked down at his hand, at the white line that cut across his palm like a brand. He'd been expecting this question, had wondered when she'd ask. "Snowstorm, 1870. I was 15 years old." "Tell me." So Sam told her about Nathan, his younger brother, only 13, but already nearly as tall as Sam. Told her about the day they'd ridden out to pull a calf from a frozen creek, about the storm that came down from the mountains so fast it turned day to night in minutes. Told her about getting separated, about searching for 2 hours until his hands were so frozen he couldn't feel the reins anymore, about making the choice to turn back. Found him the next morning. Sam said, his voice flat with old grief. 100 yards from where I'd stopped searching. He was frozen solid, one hand reaching out like he was trying to find his way home. Grace stopped walking. "Sam, I was 15. I told myself I wasn't to blame, that the storm was too much, that I'd done everything I could. But 15's old enough to know better. Old enough to know that quitting is a choice." He looked at the scar on his palm. "Got this from trying to dig through frozen ground with my bare hands. Wanted to bury him myself. Wanted to do that one last thing for him, since I hadn't been able to save him." "You were a child. Old enough to know what duty meant. Old enough to have kept searching." Sam started walking again, not wanting to see pity in her eyes. "Point is, that's why I don't give up easy. When I saw you at that fence line, I saw another chance. A chance to search long enough this time. To not quit when it got hard." Grace caught up to him, put her hand on his arm to stop him. "You saved us, Sam. You and only you. Whatever guilt you're carrying about your brother, you've more than made up for it. Doesn't work like that. Can't trade one life for another. No, but you can choose to keep living. Choose to keep helping. That's what you've done." Her grip on his arm tightened. "You're a good man, Sam Cross. Better than you think you are." The words hit somewhere deep in his chest, somewhere that still hurt, but was learning to heal. He covered her hand with his, just for a moment, just long enough to acknowledge what she'd said. That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch hands had retired to their bunks, Sam and Grace sat by the fire in the kitchen. It had become their habit, these quiet evening conversations. Martha encouraged it, said it was good for both of them to have someone who understood. Grace poured coffee and brought the cups to the table. She'd gotten better at judging how Sam liked his coffee, knew he took it black and strong, knew he wrapped both hands around the cup to warm them, even when he wasn't cold. "Can I ask you something else?" Grace said. "You're full of questions tonight. Just trying to understand something." "All right." Grace looked into her cup like the answers might be floating there. "When did you know you were going to survive, that you weren't going to let grief kill you?" Sam thought about it, really thought. About 6 months after Rebecca died. Jake was learning to crawl, getting into everything. I'd been having a particularly bad day, was sitting on the floor just staring at nothing. Jake crawled over to me, pulled himself up using my leg, and looked at me with these huge eyes. And I realized he was counting on me, not just for food and shelter, but to show him how to live, how to be a man. Sam paused. Couldn't teach him that if I was half dead myself. So you chose to live for him? At first, yes. Later, I chose it for myself too. Realized Rebecca wouldn't have wanted me to waste the years she didn't get. Would have kicked my ass for moping around when there was work to be done and a son to raise. Grace smiled, small but genuine. I like her. Wish I could have met her. She would have liked you too. Would have admired your strength. Sam sipped his coffee. What about you? When did you decide to keep going? I haven't decided yet, Grace said softly. I'm still just putting one foot in front of the other, still just surviving. That's enough. For now, that's enough. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling and the wind howling outside. Sam found himself studying Grace's face, the way the firelight caught the angles of her cheekbones, the strength in her jaw. She'd filled out some in the weeks since arriving, wasn't quite so gaunt, and the desperate edge had softened into something steadier. He realized with a start that he found her beautiful. Not in the delicate way Rebecca had been beautiful, but in a different way. A harder way. The beauty of something that had been tested and hadn't broken. The thought scared him. He wasn't ready for this, for whatever was growing between them. But it was growing whether he was ready or not, fed by proximity and shared grief, and the simple fact that they understood each other in ways few people could. Before he could examine the feeling too closely, the moment shattered. The door opened and a man walked in, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He was well-dressed, wool coat and leather gloves, a satchel under one arm. Not a ranch hand, not anyone Sam recognized. Martha appeared from the back room, her face stern. Can I help you? I'm looking for Grace Bennett, widow of Thomas Bennett. Grace stood slowly, wariness instant in her posture. I'm Grace Bennett. The man pulled papers from his satchel. My name is Silas Blackwood. I'm here on behalf of the Bank of Kerrville. Your late husband had outstanding debts. $320 plus interest accrued. Total amount owed is $380. Sam saw the color drain from Grace's face. I don't know anything about any debts. Your husband took out a loan in March of 1885, 1 month before his death. The money was to be used for land improvements. Silas held out the papers. His signature is right here. Grace took the papers with shaking hands. Sam moved to stand beside her, looked over her shoulder. The signature was there clear as day. Thomas Bennett's signature, witnessed and notarized. I didn't know, Grace whispered. He never told me. Nevertheless, as his widow, the debt transfers to you. The bank is prepared to be reasonable. We're giving you 60 days to pay the full amount, or we'll be forced to take collateral. I don't have any collateral. I lost the land when Thomas died. Silas's smile was thin and cold. Then we'll garnish your wages. And if that proves insufficient, there are other legal remedies. In some cases, the court can assign guardianship of minor children to the state until debts are satisfied. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Sam felt rage flood through him, hot and immediate. You threatening to take her children? His voice was low, dangerous. Silas turned to him with raised eyebrows. And you are someone who doesn't take kindly to men threatening women and children. I'm not threatening. I'm simply explaining the legal realities of the situation. Tom Fletcher appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Behind him, Sam could see other ranch hands gathering. Word traveled fast in the bunkhouse. There a problem here? Tom asked. No problem, Silas said smoothly. Just delivering a message. Mrs. Bennett has 60 days to settle her husband's debts. After that, I'll return with the sheriff, if necessary. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good evening. He left and the room erupted. The ranch hands were angry, talking over each other about debt collectors and vultures. Martha was trying to calm everyone down, and Grace just stood there, papers in hand, looking like someone had knocked the wind out of her. Sam guided her to a chair, gently took the papers from her hands. He read through them carefully, looking for any loophole, any way out. There was none. The debt was legitimate, the signature real, the terms clear. I didn't know, Grace said again, her voice hollow. Thomas must have taken the loan out planning to pay it back before I knew. Then he died and I had no idea. It doesn't matter if you knew or not, Sam said. What matters is we've got 60 days to come up with $380. I don't have that kind of money. Even if I worked for 10 years, I couldn't save that much. You're not going to work for 10 years. We're going to figure this out. Grace looked at him, and Sam saw fear there, raw and real. This isn't your problem, Sam. The hell it isn't. You think I'm going to stand by and let them take your children? Martha bustled over with whiskey, poured 3 fingers into a glass, and pushed it toward Grace. Drink, you've had a shock. Grace drank obediently, coughed as the liquor burned. Color came back to her cheeks, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. How much can you raise? Sam asked. I have maybe $10 saved. That's it. Sam did the math in his head. $10 from Grace. He had about 130 saved money he'd been putting aside to build Jake a proper bed and maybe expand the cabin. That was 140. Still, 240 short. I'll talk to Hiram Price in the morning, Sam said. See if he can advance you wages. Why would he do that? Because he's a decent man and because I'll ask him to. Tom spoke up from across the room. My wife does sewing for some of the town ladies. She might be able to get you some work there. Pay's not great, but it's something. Martha added, I've got some money saved. $60 or so. You can have it. I can't take your savings, Grace protested. You can and you will. What good's money sitting in a box when it could be keeping children safe? One by one, the ranch hands spoke up. One could contribute $5, another $10. A third knew a family in town that needed laundry done and would pay for the work. By the time they'd finished, they'd cobbled together nearly $200 in cash and promises of work. Still not enough. Still $80 short, maybe more, depending on how much Grace could actually earn from the extra work. But it was a start. Sam walked Grace to the corner where her children slept. Ben and Lucy were awake, had heard the commotion. Sarah was still asleep, mercifully oblivious. What's happening, Mama? Ben asked, his voice small and scared. Grace smoothed his hair, her hands shaking only slightly. Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just some grown-up business. Go back to sleep now. Are we going to have to leave? No, we're not leaving. Grace's voice was firm, and Sam heard her making it true by force of will alone. This is our home now. We're staying. After the children had settled down again, Sam walked with Grace outside. The cold hit like a wall, but neither of them seemed to notice. I can't lose them, Grace said, her voice breaking. I survived everything else. The walk from Courville, the hunger, the cold, Thomas dying. I survived all of it for them. I can't lose them now. You won't. You can't promise that. No, Sam admitted, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen. Grace turned to him, and in the moonlight, Sam saw tears tracking down her cheeks. Why do you care so much? The question deserved an honest answer. Sam thought about lying, about giving her some safe response that wouldn't reveal too much. But he was tired of lies, tired of hiding. Because I can't watch you go through this alone. Because somewhere along the way, you and your children stopped being strangers and became important. He paused, searching for the right words. Because I care about you, Grace, more than I probably should, more than I meant to. Sam, I'm not asking for anything, not expecting anything, just telling you the truth. You matter to me, and I'll be damned if I let some banker take what matters. Grace stared at him for a long moment, then closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him. It was the first time they had embraced, and Sam went still with surprise before his arms came up to hold her back. She was shaking her face pressed against his chest, and he could feel her tears soaking through his shirt. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. Me too." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other against the cold and the fear and the weight of problems too big to solve alone. And Sam realized that somewhere in the past weeks, something fundamental had shifted. Grace wasn't just someone he was helping anymore. She'd become someone he needed, someone whose pain was his pain, whose fear was his fear. He was falling in love with her. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt almost inevitable, like something that had been building since the moment he'd found her at the fence line. Maybe before that even. Maybe from the moment Rebecca died and left him hollow, creating a space that had been waiting all this time for someone who understood what it meant to lose everything. The next morning, Sam rode to the main ranch house to talk to Hiram Price. The owner was in his study going over ledgers and looked up when Sam knocked. "Sam, what brings you by?" Sam explained the situation, laying out the facts without embellishment. Hiram listened, his weathered face thoughtful. $380 is a lot of money, Hiram said when Sam finished. "I know, I'm not asking you to cover it all. Just wondering if you could advance Grace some wages. $50 maybe. She'll work it off. And you, how much are you putting in all I've got?" "About 130. Hiram studied Sam for a long moment. "You care about this woman." It wasn't a question, but Sam answered anyway. "Yes, sir, I do. Rebecca's been gone 3 years now." "Yes, sir. I always wondered if you'd let yourself move forward. Thought maybe you'd decided to stay stuck." Hiram closed his ledger. "I can advance $50, and my wife needs help with alterations on some dresses. Pays not much, but Grace can have that work if she wants it." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. Even with my 50 and your 130, you are still almost 200 short. That's a lot to make up in 60 days. Sam knew that, had been running the numbers all night trying to figure out how to bridge the gap. "We'll manage, have to." Over the following weeks, Grace worked herself to exhaustion. She maintained her regular duties at the bunkhouse, cooking and cleaning for the ranch hands. Added sewing work for Mrs. Price and 2 other women in town. Took in laundry from families willing to pay for the service. She was up before dawn and working past midnight, her hands cracked and bleeding from lye soap and needle pricks. Sam watched her deteriorate and felt helpless rage. She was losing weight, dark circles forming under her eyes, her movements becoming jerky with exhaustion. The children noticed too, became quiet and worried, tried to help in small ways that only made Sam's chest hurt. One night, 2 weeks into this brutal routine, Sam found Grace in the kitchen, past midnight, scrubbing clothes in a wash tub. Her hands were raw, the knuckles split and bleeding. She didn't even look up when he came in. "Grace, he almost done. You need to sleep. Need to finish this first." Sam crossed to her, put his hand over hers to still them. "Stop, please." "I can't stop. I need every dollar I can earn. You're killing yourself. I'm paying my debt." Her voice was flat, mechanical. "That's all that matters." "It's not all that matters. Your health matters. Your children need a mother who's alive, not one who's worked herself to death. They need a mother who can keep them safe, who won't let them be taken away." Grace pulled her hands free and went back to scrubbing. "I'll rest when this is over." Sam felt something snap inside him. "This is wrong. You shouldn't have to do this. Shouldn't have to destroy yourself for a debt you didn't even know about." "Well, I do have to, so let me work." "No." Grace looked up at him, then anger flashing in her eyes. "Excuse me?" "I said no. You're done for tonight. You're going to bed, and tomorrow you're cutting back on the extra work. You don't get to tell me what to do. Someone needs to, because you're not thinking straight anymore." "How dare you? This is my problem. My debt. My children." "And what happens when you collapse from exhaustion, when you get sick from working yourself to the bone? What happens to your children then?" Grace stood, water dripping from her hands. "I'm doing what I have to do. You're doing too much." Sam's voice rose, frustration and fear making him sharp. "I watched Rebecca work herself sick, trying to keep up with the ranch while she was pregnant. Watched her push and push because she thought she had to be strong enough for everything. And it killed her, Grace. The strain and the stress and the refusal to ask for help, it killed her." The words hung between them, raw and terrible. Grace's face went pale. "I'm not Rebecca." No, but you're making the same mistake. Thinking you have to do everything alone. Thinking asking for help makes you weak. I've been helped enough. I'm trying to stand on my own feet. By destroying yourself, that's not strength, that's stubbornness. Sam ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm down. Look, I get it, I do. After Rebecca died, I tried to do everything myself too. Nearly broke me. It was Martha who finally sat me down and said, a man who won't accept help isn't strong. He's just proud. And pride doesn't feed a baby or keep you warm at night. This is different. Help doing? Because if I don't earn this money, they'll take my children. You heard Blackwood. He said the court could assign guardianship. And I said we'd figure it out. Together, not you working yourself to death while I watch. Grace's hands clenched into fists. I don't want your money, Sam. Don't want to owe you any more than I already do. It's not about owing. It's about caring. It's about not being able to stand by and watch you suffer. Why not? Why do you care so much? And there it was, the question that demanded an answer that required Sam to be honest in a way that scared him. Because I love you. The words came out raw, unplanned. Sam hadn't meant to say them, not like this, not in the middle of an argument. But once they were out, he couldn't take them back. Didn't want to take them back. Grace went very still. What? I love you, Grace. I didn't mean to. Didn't plan on it. But somewhere between that first day at the fence line and now I fell in love with you. He took a step toward her. And I can't watch you destroy yourself. Can't stand by while you work yourself to death trying to handle everything alone. It's killing me. You can't love me. Well, I do. You barely know me. I know you survived 6 weeks on the road with 3 children. Know you work harder than any 2 men combined. Know you're stubborn and proud and stronger than you think you are. Know you'd die before you'd let anything happen to your children. Sam's voice softened. And I know what it's like to stand where you're standing, to feel like the world's crushing you and there's no way out. I know what that does to a person. Sam, I can't. I can't do this. Can't think about love or relationships or anything beyond just surviving the next 60 days. I'm not asking you to, just asking you to let me help. Let all of us help. You don't have to carry this alone. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I'm so tired. I know. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Then don't. Not alone. Let me carry some of this. Let the community carry some of it. That's what we're here for. Grace covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Sam crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing, like something in her had finally broken. He held her and let her cry, knowing she needed this release, needed to stop being strong for just a moment. Her tears soaked his shirt, and her whole body shook, and Sam just held her tighter, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring wordless comfort. When the storm finally passed, Grace pulled back slightly. Her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but some of the terrible tension had eased from her shoulders. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. You needed that. I'm a mess. You're human. It's allowed. Grace looked up at him, really looked, and Sam saw something shift behind her eyes. You really mean it, about loving me? Yes. I don't know if I can love you back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Thomas has only been gone 8 months. I'm not ready. I know, and I'm not asking you to be. Sam cupped her face, gently wiped away tears with his thumbs. I'm just asking you to let me help, to stop trying to do everything alone. Can you do that? After a long moment, Grace nodded. I'll try. That's enough. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and outside the wind howled, and the snow fell, and the world kept turning. But in that moment, in that small, warm space, something had changed between them. A door had opened just a crack, and neither of them knew yet what would come through it. The next morning brought a storm. Not a snowstorm, but close enough. The temperature dropped viciously, and the wind came screaming down from the mountains. Hiram Price sent word that everyone should shelter in place, that travel was too dangerous. Sam was at the bunkhouse when the order came. He'd brought Jake with him this morning, the two of them planning to help Tom Fletcher with some repairs. But now they were stuck, which was fine by Sam. Better here than trying to make it back to the cabin in this weather. By afternoon, the storm had intensified. The windows rattled in their frames and snow piled up in drifts against the walls. Inside, the stove burned hot, and the ranch hands played cards waiting out the weather. Grace was in the kitchen preparing supper for everyone. She moved more slowly than usual, still exhausted despite Sam's intervention. He'd made her promise to cut back on the extra work, and she'd agreed, but it would take time for her body to recover. Jake and Ben were playing with wooden blocks in the corner building, elaborate structures that they'd knock down and rebuild. Lucy was helping Grace, carefully setting out plates. Baby Sarah dozed in a basket near the stove, warm and content. It was almost peaceful, almost normal, like they were a family instead of a collection of broken pieces trying to fit together. Then Lucy spoke up. "Mama, where's Ben?" Grace looked around, frowning. "He's right there with Jake." "No, Mama, Jake's here. Ben went to get his carving." Sam's head snapped up. "What carving?" "The horse Mr. Tom was making him. Ben said it was in the stable. He went to get it before the storm got bad." Sam was on his feet instantly. When Lucy's face crumpled, sensing trouble. "I don't know. A while ago, Grace had gone white." "How long is a while, baby?" "Maybe, when we had lunch." Lunch had been 3 hours ago. Sam's blood went cold. 3 hours in this weather if Ben was lost, if he'd gotten turned around trying to get back from the stable. "Jake," Sam barked. "You know anything about this?" Jake shook his head, looking scared. "Ben said he'd be right back." "I thought he was." Tom Fletcher was already pulling on his coat. "I'll check the stable." "I'm coming with you," Sam said. "Me too," Grace added, her voice shaking. "No," Tom said. "Too dangerous. Sam and I will go. You stay here with the other children." But Grace was already putting on her coat. "That's my son out there. I'm coming." Sam knew that tone, knew there was no stopping her. "Fine, but we rope together. No one gets separated." They went out into the storm, and it was worse than Sam had imagined. The wind hit like a physical blow, and the snow was so thick he could barely see 3 feet ahead. They tied rope around their waists, forming a chain, Tom in front, then Sam, then Grace. "Ben," Sam called on. "Ben, can you hear me?" Nothing but wind. They made their way toward the stable, fighting every step. Sam kept one hand on the rope, the other shielding his eyes from the driving snow. His mind kept showing him Nathan's frozen face, kept replaying that morning 15 years ago when he'd found his brother too late. Not again. Please, God, not again. The stable was empty. Tom checked every stall, every corner. No sign of Ben. "He must have gotten turned around trying to get back," Tom shouted over the wind. "Could be anywhere." "The old equipment shed," Sam said suddenly. "By the creek. Remember when we found Jake and Ben there that time? It's their hiding spot." It was a long shot, but it was something. They set out toward the creek, moving as fast as they dared. Grace stumbled, and Sam caught her, held her steady. "We'll find him," he told her. She didn't answer, just kept moving, kept calling her son's name into the storm. The shed appeared like a ghost, barely visible through the snow. Sam yanked the door open, and there, huddled in the corner, wrapped in an old tarp, was Ben. He was conscious, but barely, his lips blue, his skin frighteningly pale. Grace was on her knees beside him instantly. "Ben, baby, can you hear me?" Ben's eyes opened, unfocused. "Mama cold." "I know, sweetheart. We've got you now." Sam scooped the boy up, wrapped him in his own coat. Ben was light, too light and cold as ice. They had to get him warm and fast. The journey back to the bunkhouse was a nightmare. Sam carried Ben while Grace and Tom guided them through the storm. Every step was a battle, every breath burned. Sam's arms ached, but he didn't dare loosen his grip. When they finally stumbled through the bunkhouse door, Martha took one look at Ben and went into action. "Get him by the stove, not too close. Grace, get blankets. Sam, warm water for a bath, not hot. Someone get Doc Harrison." They worked together, following the Martha's orders. Ben was stripped of his wet clothes, wrapped in blankets, given warm broth to sip. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, color started returning to his face. His breathing steadied. He stopped shivering quite so violently. Doc Harrison arrived and examined him thoroughly. "He'll be fine. You got to him in time. Another hour and we'd be having a different conversation." Grace sat beside Ben's cot, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I almost lost him. I almost lost my baby." Sam put his hand on her shoulder. "But you didn't. He's safe. He's going to be fine." After Ben had fallen into exhausted sleep after the doctor had left and the ranch hands had settled down for the night, Sam found Grace outside. She was standing in the snow, staring up at the stars that had emerged now that the storm had passed. You shouldn't be out here without a coat, Sam said, draping his own around her shoulders. I needed air, needed to think. About what? Grace was quiet for a long moment. About what you said, about loving me. Sam's heart kicked. Grace, you don't have to. Let me finish. She turned to face him. I can't promise you anything. Can't promise I'll ever love you back the way you want. Thomas has only been gone 8 months, and I'm still grieving him. I know. But I also know that I don't want to lose you. Don't want to keep pushing you away. You saved my son's life today. You save my life every day just by being here, by caring, by refusing to let me handle everything alone. She took a shaky breath. So I can't promise you love, not yet, maybe not ever, but I can promise I'll try. I'll try to let you in, try to build something with you, if that's enough. Sam pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. It's enough, it's more than enough. They stood like that under the winter stars, two damaged people who'd found each other at the edge of giving up. And for the first time in a long time, Sam let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something good from all this broken. The next morning brought Silas Blackwood back to the bunkhouse. He arrived with papers and a sheriff by his side, looking smug and satisfied. Time's up, Mrs. Bennett, Silas announced. Do you have the money? Grace stepped forward, chin up, despite her fear. I have $290. The debt is $380. I know, I'm still 90 short. Silas smiled coldly. Then I'm afraid we'll have to proceed with collection procedures. Wait, Sam stepped forward, pulling out a worn leather pouch. Here's the rest. Inside was $90, every cent of what Sam had left after contributing his $130. Money he'd been saving for years. Money that represented his security, his future, his plans for expanding the cabin and building a life. He handed it to Silas without hesitation. That's $380 total, Sam said. Count it if you want. Silas counted. His smile faded when the numbers came up right. This settles the debt. I'll need Mrs. Bennett to sign a release. Grace signed with shaking hands. Silas handed over a receipt, tipped his hat, and left. The sheriff nodded respectfully at Grace and Sam before following. When they were gone, Grace turned to Sam. That was all your money. It was. You gave me all your money. We gave him all our money, yours and mine, and everyone else's who contributed. That's how community works. Sam, I can't ever pay you back. Don't want you to pay me back. Want you to pay it forward. Someday someone else will be standing where you stood. You helped them. That's the payment. Grace's eyes filled. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just think about what I asked you. About trying. That's all I need. She nodded, and Sam saw something in her face that looked almost like hope. 3 days later, Sam and Grace sat outside the bunkhouse in a rare moment of warm winter sun. The children were playing nearby, their laughter bright in the cold air. I've been thinking, Sam said. About what? About land, about building, about the future. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have a piece of property east of the river. It was my grandfather's. Never had a house on it, just wild land. But it's good land. Has a spring, plenty of sun soil that'll grow things. Grace looked at him, waiting. I've been thinking about building there. A house. A real home, not just a cabin. Sam met her eyes. I'd like to build it with you. For you and your children and me and Jake. For all of us. Sam, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. You're not ready for that, and I respect it. But I'm asking if you want to build a life together. Start something new. Something that's ours. Mrs. Grace was quiet for a long time. Is it good soil? The best. Would I be building beside you, beside me, with me, together? She looked out at the land, at the children playing, at the future that was suddenly possible. Then she looked back at Sam, and he saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke. All right, she said, let's build something. And just like that, the ice broke. Not all at once, not dramatically, but with a quiet crack that promised spring was coming. They had a long way to go, still repairs to make, foundations to lay, walls to raise. But they'd do it together. And that made all the difference. The frost was lifting at last. June came to Wyoming territory with a promise of heat and growth. The snow had finally melted, leaving the prairie green and alive, dotted with wildflowers that swayed in the constant wind. Sam Cross stood in the back of a borrowed wagon, securing the last of the supplies, while Grace checked on the children one final time. They were leaving the bunkhouse, leaving the safety and routine they'd built over the winter, moving to the land east of the river to build something that was theirs alone. Hiram Price approached his weathered face thoughtful. "You sure about this, Sam?" "Sure as I can be about anything, sir. That land's been sitting empty for 10 years. Your grandfather would be glad to see it finally used." Hiram handed Sam a cloth bundle. "Tools, some extras from the ranch. You'll need them." "I can't take your tools." "You can and you will. A man can't build a house without proper tools." Hiram's eyes moved to where Grace was saying goodbye to Martha. "She's good for you. You're both good for each other." "I hope so, sir." "More than hope, I can see it. You're different now than you were 6 months ago. More alive, like you finally remembered how to be a man instead of just a ghost going through motions." The words hit home because they were true. Sam had spent 3 years as a ghost functioning but not living. Grace had changed that. She and her children had reminded him what it meant to care about something beyond just surviving. Martha was crying when Grace pulled away from their embrace. The old woman rarely showed emotion, but she'd grown fond of Grace, saw her almost as a daughter. "You take care of yourself," Martha said gruffly, "and don't be a stranger. You come back to visit, you hear?" "I will, I promise." Martha turned to Sam, her eyes sharp. "You take care of her. And those children. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She pulled him into a quick, fierce hug. "You've done good, Sam Cross. Rebecca would be proud." The mention of Rebecca's name no longer felt like a knife. Sam could think of his first wife now with fondness instead of just pain, could remember the good times without being crushed by her loss. That was Grace's doing too. She'd shown him that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. The children climbed into the wagon excited and chattering. Jake and Ben sat in back legs dangling over the edge. Lucy held baby Sarah, who was now almost 2 and toddling everywhere. The boys had brought their treasures, Jake his slingshot, Ben a wooden horse Tom Fletcher had carved for him. Sam helped Grace onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. He took the reins and clicked his tongue. The horses moved forward, pulling them away from the bunkhouse and toward their future. The journey took 2 hours. The land changed as they traveled, becoming more wooded near the river, the soil darker and richer. Sam pointed out landmarks, teaching as he went. "See those cottonwoods? That's the edge of the property. Creek runs year-round through there. Good water never goes dry, even in drought." Grace listened, absorbing it all. She'd changed too over the winter. The desperate edge was gone, replaced by quiet confidence. She'd learned she could survive, could work, could stand on her own feet. Now she was choosing not to stand alone. When they crested the final rise, Sam pulled the horses to a stop. Below them lay the land, a clearing, surrounded by cottonwoods, with the creek running silver through tall grass. It was wild, untamed, beautiful in its roughness. "There," Sam said. "That's home." Grace stared at the land, her hand coming up to shade her eyes. "It's beautiful. It's raw, but good. The soil's rich, the water is clean, and there's enough timber nearby to build whatever we need." "Where will the house go?" Sam pointed to a spot on a slight rise, sheltered by trees, but with a clear view of the surrounding land. "There, high enough that we won't flood, close enough to the creek for easy water access. Good drainage, good light." They descended to the clearing and Sam helped everyone down. The children immediately scattered, exploring, running through the tall grass with shouts of excitement. Grace walked slowly around the clearing, taking it all in. "It feels right," she said finally, "like we're supposed to be here." "That's because we are." They spent that first night under canvas, the tent Sam had brought, providing shelter. He built a fire and they cooked simple food, the children falling asleep early from all the excitement. After they'd settled, Sam and Grace sat by the dying fire, watching sparks drift up toward the stars. "Nervous?" Sam asked. "Terrified, but also excited. I haven't felt excited about anything in a long time." "Me either." Sam poked at the fire with a stick. "I was thinking about tomorrow. We should start with the foundation. Get that right and everything else will follow." "Teach me." "I will. Every step. By the time we're done, you'll know how to build a house from nothing." Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "Thank you, Sam, for all of this. Thank me when we've got walls and a roof." She laughed softly and the sound made Sam's chest warm. He was doing this. Really doing this, building a life with someone again. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next morning they began. Sam had brought stakes and string, and he used them to mark out the foundation, showing Grace how to measure and check that everything was level and square. Foundation determines everything, he explained, Jake and Ben watching with interest. If it's not level, if the corners aren't true, every wall we build will be crooked. The house will never sit right. He drove stakes into the ground at the corners, then strung line between them. Grace watched his hands, memorizing the movements. Why does it have to be so exact? Jake asked. Sam knelt down to his son's level. Because this house is going to stand long after we're gone. It'll be here for your children and your children's children. We're building for them, not just for us. Jake's eyes went wide, understanding the weight of what they were doing. Ben nodded seriously, equally impressed. They spent the next 3 days digging the foundation trenches. It was hard work, the soil packed with rocks that had to be pried out by hand. Sam's back ached and his hands blistered despite years of ranch work. But Grace worked beside him, matching him shovel for shovel, never complaining. You're strong, Sam said one afternoon, watching her haul out a particularly stubborn rock. I've had to be. No, I mean really strong. Most women couldn't do this work. Grace wiped sweat from her forehead. Most women haven't had to walk 100 miles with 3 children. You do what you have to do. That's all. Once the trenches were dug, they began laying stone. Sam showed Grace how to choose the right rocks, the largest and flattest for the bottom layer, smaller ones to fill the gaps. They mixed mortar from lime and sand, Sam teaching her the right consistency. Too wet and it won't hold. Too dry and it'll crumble. See, like this. Thick enough to spread, but not so thick it runs. Grace mixed carefully, getting the feel for it. The work was methodical, almost meditative. Place a stone, add mortar, place another stone. Layer by layer, the foundation took shape. The children helped when they could, bringing water or smaller rocks. Jake was particularly interested, asking questions about every step. Ben was quieter, but just as attentive, watching everything Sam did with careful eyes. After a week, the foundation was complete. Sam and Grace stood back to admire it, tired but satisfied. First step done, Sam said. How many more steps? Too many to count, but we'll get there. The next phase was timber. Sam and Tom Fletcher, who came by on weekends to help cut cottonwood logs and hauled them to the building site. Each log had to be stripped of bark, then notched on the ends so they'd fit together properly. Sam taught Jake and Ben how to use the draw knife to strip bark, showing them the proper angle and pressure. The boys worked diligently, proud to be contributing real labor. That's good work, Sam told them. Real cowboy work. Jake beamed. Ben looked pleased but quieter, and Sam noticed the boy had been withdrawing lately. He made a mental note to talk to Grace about it. Raising the walls was slow work. Each log was heavy, requiring 2 people to lift into place. Sam and Grace developed a rhythm, working in tandem without needing many words. Lift position, check level, adjust, secure. Over and over, the walls rising, log by log. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Sam found Jake sitting alone by the creek, throwing stones into the water with unnecessary force. What's troubling you, son? Jake didn't answer at first, just threw another stone. Sam sat down beside him, waiting. He'd learned patience from raising a child alone. Sometimes you just had to sit and let the silence work. Is Miss Grace going to be my new ma? Jake finally asked. There it was, the question Sam had been expecting, but dreading. I don't know, maybe. Would that bother you? I don't know, Jake's voice was small, confused. I don't want to forget Ma, my real Ma. Sam's heart clenched. He pulled Jake close against his side. Listen to me. You will never forget your mother. Never. I won't let you, and neither will Grace. Your Ma gave me you, and that's the greatest gift I ever got. I loved her, Jake. I still love her. Then why do you love Miss Grace? Because a man's heart is bigger than we sometimes think. It can hold more than one person. Loving Grace doesn't mean I love your mother less. It just means I'm choosing to live instead of just exist. Sam paused, searching for the right words. Your ma wouldn't want us to be sad forever. She'd want us to be happy, to build a life, don't you think? Jake was quiet, thinking. I guess. And Grace isn't trying to replace your mother. She's Grace, someone new who cares about us. About you, is that so bad? No. Jake threw another stone, but with less force this time. I like her. I like Ben and Lucy and Sarah. I like having brothers and sisters. Me too. But it feels wrong sometimes, like I'm betraying Mama. That feeling will pass, not all at once, but slowly. And whenever you want to talk about your mother, I'm here. We can remember her together. All right, Jake nodded against Sam's chest. They sat there until full dark, father and son, talking about Rebecca and Grace and what it meant to move forward while still honoring the past. By the time they went back to the tent, some of the weight had lifted from Jake's shoulders. The walls went up over the next 2 weeks. Grace's hands grew calloused from handling rough timber. Sam's shoulders ached from lifting, but the structure took shape solid and real exactly where Sam had envisioned it. One afternoon, Grace was working alone, fitting a smaller log into place when Ben approached. He'd been quiet all day, and Grace had noticed but hadn't pushed. Mama? Yes, baby. Is Mr. Sam going to be my new pa? Grace's hands stilled. She climbed down from her perch and knelt to Ben's level. I don't know, would you want him to be? Ben's face scrunched up. I don't want to forget Pa, my real Pa. Grace pulled him close, her heart breaking for this child who'd lost so much so young. You won't forget him. I won't let you. Your father was a good man, and he loved you very much. Then why are we here? Why aren't we at home? Because home is gone, sweetheart. The land, the house, all of it. We had to leave. But that doesn't mean we forget your father. It means we carry him with us while we build something new. Do you love Mr. Sam? The question was direct, and Grace owed her son an honest answer. I think I'm starting to. Not the same way I loved your father. Different. But yes, I think I'm falling in love with him. Will he be good to us? Yes, he already is good to us. Ben thought about this. He's teaching me and Jake to be cowboys. I know. And he never gets mad when we mess up. He just shows us again. That's the kind of man he is. Okay. Ben's acceptance was that simple, that complete. Children had a way of cutting through complexity to what mattered. Can I go play now? Of course. Grace watched her son run off to join Jake, and she felt something settle in her chest. Her children were healing. They were building not just a house, but a family. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. By late June, the walls were complete, and it was time for the roof. This was the heaviest work, requiring more help than Sam and Grace could provide alone. Sam rode back to the ranch and talked to Hiram. We're ready for the raising, sir, if the offer of help still stands. Hiram smiled. I'll spread the word. Saturday work for you. Saturday's perfect. Good. We'll make a day of it. That Saturday wagon started arriving before dawn. Ranch hands their families townspeople who had heard about the raising and wanted to help. Martha came with enough food to feed an army. Tom Fletcher brought tools and extra rope. Doc Harrison came just in case. Even the sheriff rode out wanting to contribute. Sam stood with Grace watching people arrive and felt his throat tighten with emotion. Look at all these people, Grace whispered. Community. This is what it means. They organized the work crews. The men would handle the heavy lifting, getting the roof beams into position. The women would prepare food and keep the workers fed and hydrated. The children would stay clear, but could help with small tasks. Sam directed the operation, years of ranch work, making him a natural leader. Tom, you take the west side. Jack, you've got east. I'll handle the south beam with whoever's strong enough to help. The first beam went up smoothly, 10 men working in coordination to lift it into place. They used pulleys and ropes, the system efficient and well-practiced. Sam felt pride watching it come together, watching people work as one unit toward a common goal. The second beam was trickier. It was slightly warped, requiring careful positioning. Sam climbed up to guide it, calling directions to the men below. A little more to the left, no too far, back to the right. There, hold it steady. He reached out to grab the beam to pull it into final position. At that exact moment, the rope on one side slipped. The beam jerked sideways, catching Sam's right hand between the timber and the wall. Pain exploded through his hand. Sam heard bone crack, felt something give way. He couldn't pull free without dropping the beam, which would endanger the men below. Hold it, he roared through clenched teeth. Don't let go. Tom saw what had happened and moved fast. I've got it, Sam. Let go. My hands caught. I know. On three, we're going to shift it 6 inches to the right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The beam shifted. Sam yanked his hand free and nearly fell, catching himself on a support post with his good hand. Pain made his vision blur, made his stomach heave. He climbed down one-handed, cradling his right hand against his chest. Grace was there immediately, her face white with fear. Let me see. Sam held out his hand. It was already swelling, the fingers bent at wrong angles. Two broken for sure, maybe three. Blood seeped from where the wood had torn skin. Doc Harrison pushed through the crowd. Sit down, Sam. They got him to a chair someone had brought. Doc examined the hand with gentle but thorough fingers. Sam gritted his teeth against the pain, sweat beading on his forehead. Two fingers broken, maybe three, going to need splints. Doc looked up at Sam. No more work for you today. Probably not for 2 weeks. Can't. House needs finishing. House can wait. Your hand can't. Doc was already pulling supplies from his bag. You want to be able to use this hand for the rest of your life, you rest it now. The next few minutes were agony as Doc set the broken bones and splinted them. Sam focused on breathing, on not passing out, on the feel of Grace's hand, gripping his good one. When it was done, Doc wrapped the whole hand in bandages. Keep it elevated. Don't use it. Come see me in a week. Sam looked at his bandaged hand, then at the half-finished roof. But the house. We'll finish it, Tom said. You've done your part. Let us do ours. And they did. While Sam sat with his injured hand throbbing, the community finished the roof. The beams went up one by one, secured with skilled hands. The planking followed, each board carefully placed and nailed. By late afternoon, the roof was complete. A cheer went up from the workers. Children ran around shouting with excitement. Women started bringing out food, spreading it on tables made from planks and sawhorses. Grace sat beside Sam, her hand on his shoulder. You all right? Hand hurts like hell, but we've got a roof. We do. She looked at him with something that might have been love. You scared me when you got hurt. Scared myself. Don't do it again. Sam managed to smile despite the pain. I'll try not to. The celebration went on into evening. There was food and music, someone had brought a fiddle, and people danced on the grass near the new house. Children ran wild, playing tag in the gathering dusk. Adults stood in groups talking and laughing. Sam watched it all with his injured hand elevated on a pillow Martha had provided. He felt strangely peaceful despite the pain. This was community. This was what people could build together when they chose to help instead of turn away. Grace brought him a plate of food and sat beside him. Martha made your favorite, beef stew. She's a good woman. The best. Grace looked at the house, now complete except for interior work. We did it. We actually built a house. We did. Couldn't have done it without help, but we did it. What comes next? We make it a home. As the sun set and the celebration wound down, people started leaving. They said their goodbyes, promised to visit, offered continued help if needed. Martha was last to go, pulling Grace into another fierce hug. You've got something good here. Don't let fear ruin it. I won't. After everyone had gone, after the children had been put to bed in the tent one last time, Sam and Grace walked to the new house. They stood in the doorway looking at the empty space that would soon be filled with furniture and life and memories. First night in our house, Grace said. Not quite. Still need to finish the interior, build beds, install the stove, 100 other things. But the bones are here, the foundation and walls and roof. Everything else is just details. Sam looked down at her, at this woman who'd come into his life broken and desperate and had somehow become essential. Grace, I need to tell you something. What? That day at the fence line when I found you, I thought I was helping a stranger, doing a good deed and then moving on. I didn't expect you to become this. He gestured between them with his good hand. Didn't expect to fall in love with you. Sam, let me finish. I know you're not ready to love me back. No, Thomas is still too recent, too raw. But I need you to know that I'm here for the long run. I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be waiting. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. That's not true. It is. I'm broken and scared, and I don't know if I'll ever be whole again. Then we'll be broken together, and maybe over time we'll help each other heal. She kissed him, then soft and tentative and full of promise. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like hope. I can't promise you everything, she whispered against his lips, but I can promise I'll try. I'll try to love you the way you deserve. That's all I need. They stood in the doorway of their unfinished house holding each other as darkness fell and stars emerged. And Sam Cross, who'd spent 3 years as a ghost, felt fully alive for the first time since Rebecca died. 6 months later, winter had returned to Wyoming territory. But this time, Sam and Grace faced it from inside a completed house, warm and secure, and surrounded by children's laughter. The interior had been finished over the summer and fall, beds built and installed, a kitchen table crafted from pine stove hauling in and connected. Grace had hung curtains and planted an herb garden. Sam had built a chicken coop and a small stable for their 2 horses. It was a home now lived in and loved. One evening in December, there was a knock at the door. Sam opened it to find a young man standing in the snow, maybe 25, exhausted and frightened. Help you? Sam asked. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Henry, from Nebraska. My wagon broke down about half a mile back. Wife and children are still there. I was hoping I could get some water, maybe borrow a tool to fix the wheel. Sam saw himself in this young man's face, saw the same desperation, the same fear. How many in your family? My wife and 2 children. Boys 4, baby girl, just 6 months. Sam and Grace exchanged a look. She nodded. I'll get my tools and a horse, Sam said. We'll bring your family here. Get them warm, fix your wagon in the morning. I can't impose. You're not. Come on. They rode out into the cold, found Henry's wife and children huddled in a broken wagon. The woman was crying, the children whimpering with cold. Sam and Grace loaded them onto horses and brought them back to the house. Grace immediately started making food while Sam settled the family by the stove. The children warmed up quickly. The baby stopped crying, the mother's tears dried. Henry looked around the house with wonder. You're so kind. Why would you help complete strangers? Sam met Grace's eyes across the room. Because someone once helped us. That's how this works. You pass it on. After the family had been fed and bedded down in the loft, Sam and Grace sat by the fire in their bedroom, listening to the house settle around them. We did it, Grace said softly. Did what? Became what Martha said we could be. Became the kind of people who help instead of turn away. You always were that person, just needed time to remember it. Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. In 6 months, they'd been married by a traveling preacher, a simple ceremony with just the children and a few friends present. Jake had called Grace Ma for the first time in last week. Ben had stopped asking about his father carrying Thomas's memory in a quieter way. The girls were thriving. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when grief rose up unexpected. But there was also joy and love and the knowledge that they'd built something real from the wreckage of their losses. I love you, Grace whispered. It was the first time she'd said it. Sam's breath caught. Moo it again. I love you, Sam Cross. Took me a while to get there, but I do. Sam kissed the top of her head. I love you too. Always will. Outside, snow fell soft and steady. Inside, the house creaked and settled, learning to hold their lives. And 2 people who'd been broken found themselves becoming whole in each other's arms. The fire burned low. The house grew quiet. And in the darkness, Sam Cross fell asleep with a smile on his face, grateful beyond measure for the day he'd chosen not to ride past a desperate woman at a fence line. Back on the porch in Wyoming, autumn of 1950, Sam finished his story. Michael sat in stunned silence, processing everything he'd heard. So Grandma Grace, Michael said slowly, she was the woman at the fence. She was. And you built that house in Wyoming, the one Uncle Ben still lives in. We built it together, every beam, every board, with help from people who cared enough to show up. Sam looked at his grandson. That's what I wanted you to understand before you ship out, before you go off to serve, before you start building your own life. What exactly, Yabo? That strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to give it. Your grandmother taught me that. She was the strongest person I ever met, and she nearly destroyed herself trying to do everything alone. Sam leaned forward. Don't make that mistake, Michael. When life knocks you down, and it will let people help you up. Michael nodded slowly. What happened to Grandma? You said she died 2 years ago. Cancer. We had 62 years together. Every single day I chose her, and she chose me. Built a life that mattered. Raised 7 children between us, have 15 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren. You're one of them. And the land, that house in Wyoming, still standing. Your Uncle Ben keeps it up, lives there with his family. The foundation we laid 64 years ago is still solid. Sam pointed to the foundation of this house. Same principles I used here. Build with care, build to last, build for the people who come after you. Michael stood and walked to the railing, looking out over the ranch. Why are you selling this place if it means so much to you? Sam joined him at the railing. Because it's not the land that matters, son. Never was. It's what you build on it. The family, the values, the legacy. I built this house with the knowledge I learned from that first one. Your grandmother and I raised our children here. Now they're grown, she's gone, and it's time for someone else to build their life here. Where will you go? Your father's house in town. He's got the space and his children are grown now. I'm 95 years old. Don't need to keep working this land anymore. I'll miss this place. Me too, but places are just places. It's the people that matter. The memories we carry. Sam put his hand on Michael's shoulder. When you ship out, when you start your own life, remember that. It's not about the building or the ton or the money. It's about the people you choose to build with, the community you create, the help you give and accept. Michael's eyes were wet. I'll remember, Grandpa. Good. Sam looked out over the land one more time. And one more thing. When you build whatever you're building, whether it's a house or a career or a family, build with a solid foundation. Build it to last. Build it for the people who will come after you're gone. They stood together on the porch as the sun set, grandfather and grandson, one life ending and another beginning. The land stretched out before them, the same land Sam had worked for decades, the same land that had taught him everything worth knowing. Did you ever regret it? Michael asked. Helping Grandma that day, taking on someone else's burden. Sam thought about it, really thought. Remembered that cold October morning, the woman at the fence line, the choice to stop instead of ride on. Remembered everything that had followed. The work, the fear, the love, the life they'd built together. Not once, he said, not for a single second. Even knowing how it would end, knowing you'd lose her. Especially knowing that. Because having 62 years with someone you love is worth the pain of losing them. And because building something with another person, really building it together, that's what makes life worth living. Michael nodded, understanding, settling in his young face. Thank you for telling me, for sharing this. You're welcome. Just promise me you'll remember it. When things get hard, when you feel alone, remember that asking for help isn't weakness. It's strength. I promise. They went inside as full dark fell. Sam moved slowly, his 95-year-old body reminding him of all the hard work it had done, all the years it had carried him. But his mind was clear. His heart was full, and he had no regrets. That night, lying in bed in the house he'd built with knowledge learned from Grace, Sam closed his eyes and thought about foundations. About how the important ones weren't made of stone and mortar, but of love and commitment and the choice to keep showing up even when it was hard. He thought about that young man at the fence line all those years ago, Henry from Nebraska with his broken wagon and his frightened family. Wondered if he'd passed it on, if he'd helped someone else who needed it. Liked to think he had, liked to think the kindness had rippled outward, like waves from a stone thrown in water. And he thought about Grace, always Grace, standing at that fence line with her children and her broken hope. Thought about the moment he'd chosen to stop instead of riding past. The single decision that had changed everything. She'd been right that day, so many years ago, when she'd said maybe they'd help each other heal. They had. Two broken people had built something whole, something that had lasted a lifetime and would continue to last through their children and grandchildren. The foundation was solid. The house would stand. Sam Cross smiled in the darkness and let himself drift towards sleep, knowing that when morning came, when the realtor arrived with papers to sign, he'd be ready. Ready to let go of the land while keeping what mattered. The memories, the lessons, the love, the knowledge that what we build together lasts far longer than what we build alone. And somewhere in a house in Wyoming that still stood on foundations late in 1886, the wind whispered through cottonwoods, and a family went about their evening living in a space built by two people who'd refused to give up, who'd chosen to help instead of turning away, who'd built something that mattered. The frost had lifted long ago, but the house remained solid and true, a testament to what's possible when two broken people choose to build together instead of falling apart alone. Sam's last thought before sleep took him was simple, true, and complete. We did good, Grace. We did good.